So today I'm talking about biophysiological patterns. There's this biophysiological pattern, which is push out or pull in. This is about reaching for, which pulls in, or displacing, which pushes out. It's this idea that we translate into giving and taking, something we pull in. It's like when we think of magnetism or appetite, and then pushing out, which is giving, so giving and taking. We can think of this in water outlets and inlets, water channeling out and water channeling in. We've heard of the sayings, all rivers flow into one, and you never step in the same river twice. Like, this is because it's always coming from somewhere, going to something like this. And then we have the ideas of electricity and magnet. I'm sure people have heard of electromagnetic field because it's a positive and a negative. There's taking and there's giving. Like even on an atom, the valence electrons, they take or give an electron with others. Thinking of flowers, they push out, right? Or flowers, even like when we think of the water coming up the flower from the stem, from the soil. So there's this opening. But then also when the sun goes away, sometimes flowers pull in, they close in. We think of our neurons, they have things that are sticking out and things that are receiving. So it's the axon is the long string, then you have the soma, which is like the body of it, and then you have the dendrites sticking out. And then on the other side, you also have things that stick out. And it's all about making connections. This is a biophysiological pattern. It depends on which perspective is the start or the origin, because you have in the body afferent or efferent neurons. And this means neurons that are going away from the brain to the body and neurons that are coming back toward the brain from the body. Even the heart has, for the blood vessels tube, we say there's effect and affect. Efferent and afferent, same idea, right? The vein, which is deoxygenated, it means the oxygen was removed, it's more positive because when the oxygen is in it, it's more negative. Oxygen has a negative charge, O2. And when we think of an artery, there's more oxygen, it's more negative. And this is from and to a central location base. The muscles rip in separation, then bind together. We have this rest, recuperate, recover kind of cycle. So little tiny fibers separate. Then during rest, there's a recuperation. They recoup, and recover, they recover their bond. When we invert the taker-in core to a putter-outer core, I'm going to reference, there's an angel I learned with you about called Lahadriel. It turns something that's a taker into a giver. And I want to talk more also, I mentioned this coiling pattern once before, and I actually saw the video did not upload, so I uploaded it again for some reason. And this is the idea of will to purpose as a station. After will to purpose, then we have intention, formation, and purpose. So when we talk about will to purpose, we're talking about there's a will to a purpose. And there is intention, there's information, and then there's purpose. How does that look for us? Thinking of two cells, the will to purpose, the parents want to have a child. And over time, these two cells, over 40 weeks, whether it's intelligence, time, technology, 100 trillion cells with muscles, organs, tissues, reproductive system, and parts. And recognizing the constant growth and the constant experience, constant learning, constant thriving, constant newness. There's a processing capacity constantly. There's adaptive capacity constantly. We have this called as bandwidth or parameters. How much constantness can be going on. This is how we cultivate. It's a magnitude that's massive. We cultivate and nurture the vitality and the genesis of the electric body's cells that are reflected in the physical world. I mentioned electromagnetic frequency, and they call this EMF. Some people say it's bad, but your body has electromagnetic frequency. There's a field of going out and coming in. There's a field of drawing in and sending out. We also know of, especially in the Torah, the 7-year cycles because of maintenance. The inner biology adapts and changes based on what's going on, quote unquote, out there. There's been scientists that say that every 7 years, the cells that do replace themselves, it's all new. It's all new. So what is being held is information from memories. That's how people could stay the same even more than 7 years, for 10 years or whatever. And in Torah, we learn that actually everything gets a fresh start, the land and the occupations, every 7 years because of Shemitah, the sabbatical. And we have to look at it. There's tens of thousands of new daily cells of the nervous system, like DNA, RNA, protein expression. What does that mean? DNA is the original code. RNA is the copy code, which is like sort of the inverse of it. And not as protected, not as detailed. And then what could come out of it is the protein, or in other words, the things that are expressed, the physical translation. We call this the code, the transcription. Transcription is like kind of like a zip file of the original. Actually, I'm sorry, the zip file is the original. Then we have like the code that's just needed for that part. And then it's translated into something. This we could think of as the program, the transliteration, and then the production or the manufacture. And we know Kabbalistically from time, we have the worlds Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. So will is usually associated with Yetzirah, but because we say like Yetzer, your Yetzer is where you go. But in this case, we're calling it more like in the will to purpose. There's another word for it, which is more like the it's almost like when you have a solution to a problem, but without the problem, it would be more the genesis. So I'm going to call it generation. Often that world is called emanation. So we generate something is a will to a purpose, like that we want to generate something, to create it. And then we have the intention, like it's going to be, we create it, right? Then information, it becomes something, and then the purpose, it could do it. And when we increase the complexity of cells, tissues, or systems, we can keep expressing higher levels of health and well-being, and higher levels of homeostasis. Homeostasis being that baseline. But let's say your regular performance at 7 years old, your homeostasis to keep it normal is one element. But 10 years later, your homeostasis, what your normal is a lot higher. So as the cells are developing and the complexity, the tissues, the organs, muscle memory and abilities, also cells have the right shape and structure. We call this the anatomy, and the functionability, which is the physiology. For example, think of sweat glands, hair bulbs, thermoregulator cells, insulin-making cells, the right and left lungs, which share blood to the heart to get O2 or give CO2, carbon dioxide, carbon matching the oxygen, which for the charge, right, giving and taking electricity or magnetism. And remembering that in the biophysiological patterns, signals help maintain, because it's the nervous system inviting us to move forward into the new homeostasis, which is I don't want to always use the word better, but a more right balance, an equilibrium that's more sustainable. And sometimes it's less than we thought, and sometimes it's more than we thought. And it's not about better or worse, because homeostasis is more like the correct balanced place. For example, when you set if you have a central air, you would set it, homeostasis would be the temperature that it's maintaining. Whether it gets too cold or too hot, it comes back to the middle. So it's not necessarily, oh, it's better or worse, but you don't want to overperform or underperform. Remember, we talked about the muscles. They need to be able to recuperate. And then we talked about how you don't want to underperform because the lungs, they need to be able to, in the blood vessels, from the air from the lungs, it needs to be able to get around the whole body and not, we don't want to have, too much carbon dioxide building up, right? So whatever it is, these are biophysiological patterns that teach us about how the world works. And I'll stop here and wish you a good day. Bye.